place in other continents, other cities, and hopefully next year in more cities. And hopefully we're going to speak in the Holocaust, maybe also in a new context, not only in the context of evil, but also in the context of its opposite, of goodness and creativity, and many, many of the things that we value in humanity. I'll speak to you about three things as briefly as I can. About Raoul Wallenberg, about rescue and obstruction. It's not just rescue. Things go sometimes hand in hand. Dark and light go hand in hand. Rescue and, unfortunately, obstruction by Jews also occurred during the Holocaust. And just like Dr. Pavlias said, that's maybe one of the reasons why we don't have the wherewithal to come clean and to face ourselves and tell each other the truth. After all, we're such a small people, we must tell the truth to each other. We must trust each other. And the third thing we're going to speak about, the message that Yad Vashem has, which we believe in very much. The question is, what is the meaning of it? Remembering the past, shaping the future. The question is, what does that mean? These are the things I'm talking about. Raoul Wallenberg. Tonight's event is held to remember that during Europe's recent dark and barbaric age, when I went to school we studied about the Dark Ages, but a dark age occurred about 60 years ago, 70 years ago in Europe. Let's call it that. There was also light during that time, such as Raoul Wallenberg, but not only Raoul Wallenberg. In this context, a few important thoughts come to mind. Number one, it is said that Raoul Wallenberg rescued from tens of thousands to 100,000 Jews in Budapest, where I was. Although he was not a professional rescuer, he didn't study rescue, he studied architecture at the University of Michigan. In contrast, during the same time, the so-called professionals, such as world leaders, failed. It was not they who rescued 100,000 Jews in Budapest. Similar statement can be made about the success of the major Jewish rescuers of Raoul Wallenberg's caliber, and the gross failure of Jewish leaders who were far too often literally and figuratively out to lunch. These people used to take lunch hours during the Holocaust and vacations. They were not only apathetic many times and unimaginative, but they often actively sabotaged rescue for all kinds of foolish reasons. Because of this phenomenon, probably large numbers of us died. It wasn't only the Nazis that killed us, apathy can also kill. Lack of creativity in times of crisis can also kill. Unfortunately, a similar pattern of obstruction of rescue by professionals returned during the campaign to allow Soviet Jewish immigration. Once again, it was the amateur rescuers who succeeded and the professionals who tried to stop the saving of the Russian Jews. Also, we have to talk about that one day. The rescuers like Raoul Wallenberg successfully the second point is, people like Raoul Wallenberg successfully negotiated with the Nazi and Hungarian fascist murderers. We know that. You don't have to do any more research about that. Surprisingly, it was not possible to carry out such rescue missions in context of the international communist gulag, which swallowed an estimated 94 million lives, primarily in Russia, the Soviet Union, and in China. This is also a fact that we have to reflect on. It was possible to rescue from the evil Nazis, but not from the communists, and from other people who were seemingly idealists. Also the fact that, surprisingly, communism, which has such a murderous past, still has a positive afterglow, unlike Nazism, despite its monumental crimes. The third point is, despite the Jewish collective death to Raoul Wallenberg, and many promises made at the highest level to his family, as far as we know, the state of Israel did little, if anything, to convince Russia to release remaining information about Wallenberg's fate. Same thing can be said about Hungary. I, for example, at one time was a Hungarian citizen. Wallenberg and the others saved hundreds of thousands of Jews in Budapest. One would have to ask, what are the Hungarians, many of whom are murderers, do at this stage? How did they repay their moral debt? Also to Wallenberg. Fourth point about Wallenberg. Finally, it is to be said very clearly as possible, as my friend Eli Yosef says many, many times, that Russia, which adopted Wallenberg, was not the liberator of Europe, as we say, but they were Hitler's willing ally. They raped the Baltic states, they raped Poland, and also they raped their way to women, all the way to Berlin. And they were the post-war era's brutal imperialists and colonizers. I in Hungary learned about the imperialists that I didn't even know as a child, that the real imperialist was the Soviet Union. Unlike Germany, Russia did no soul searching for its massive crimes and paid no moral reparation to its victims as far as we know. Moreover, today Russia is providing Iran with nuclear capability, threatening our lives and existence. Will we Jews again desperately need Raoul Wallenberg to save the remnants of us, like it happened in Budapest? This was about Raoul Wallenberg. I'd like to speak about rescue and obstruction. I speak to you tonight on behalf of a volunteer apolitical group called the Jerusalem Working Group. It was formed to assure appropriate level of recognition, not recognition, appropriate level of recognition. It's finally given to major Jewish rescuers, the Jewish Wallenbergs, one whose daughter sits with us, Dr. Becky Cook. Father was Hillel Cook. That we speak truthfully about the Holocaust. And we learn important lessons for our time, not only for that time, we were murdered and tortured and humiliated, but for our time. The lessons to be learned, which we missed learning. Neither recognition nor the learning of lessons have taken place until today. But I feel that's about to change. There were Jewish rescuers with amazing ability and achievements. Names such as Rabbi Michael Weissman, Gisi Fleischmann, Hillel Cook, George Mantello, Recha Sternbruch, Rabbi Solomon Schoenfeld, and others should be well known to every Jew, and also to many non-Jews. Israel and Jewish organizations, Holocaust centers, are determined until now to deny appropriate level of recognition to Jewish rescuers. As a result of this denial, we have no stamps, no coins, no meaningful curricular modules, no major exhibits, no state ceremonies, no public places named after in their honor. Nor do we present the regretful phenomenon of apathy, lack of imagination, and obstruction of rescue during the Holocaust. We hide it under the carpet. And unfortunately, not only by the Jewish leaders in America, but the Jewish leaders in England, the Jewish leaders in Switzerland, the Jewish leaders in Sweden, and the Jewish leaders, Zionist leaders in the Yishuv. We also purposefully excise from history the Swiss people's grassroots protests. I don't know if you heard about this ever. There were major protests in Switzerland toward the end of the war on our behalf. Not the government's protest, the people's protest, with 400 degrading headlines. It's also erased from history. And these grassroots movements had phenomenal impact on rescue. Some historians feel that that's the reason why the train stopped from Budapest, and if they didn't stop, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. Collectively, we agreed silently without speaking to each other not to tell the truth to each other and to the world. And we deny a significant part of Holocaust history. I'm saying all these negative things because I hopefully one day it will be positive, things will change. Even though we're in university today, this is not an academic event, it's an activist event. We like things to remember things and like the future to change. We must demand that those few who cared for us and tried their best to save us from the evils of Europe's recent barbaric period are appropriately recognized, especially in Israel and by Jewish communities worldwide. We must not allow this to become another ugly fiasco, such as the robbing of Holocaust victims by Israeli banks and other institutions, which as far as we know have yet to settle, unlike the Swiss. This week's Rabbi Melchior's Knesset committee firmly instructed Yad Vashem and the Ministry of Education to immediately address this issue. I think in large part thanks to somebody sitting with us and will speak after me, Chaim Roth, who I think has been lobbying for this for many, many years, much longer than I, and apparently with greater success. This is a laudable first step, and the results are yet to be seen. We have to yet to see if the Knesset decision has any impact in Israel. Hopefully it does, because maybe it is a new page for us. This aspect of Holocaust history has not been dealt with truthfully, because we established Yad Vashem as an unregulated individual intellectual monopoly. I sort of disagree with Dr. Paul here. I think that there are other reasons. It must be recognized that Yad Vashem is an intellectual monopoly, just like the Ministry of Communications was a monopoly. Just like the commercial monopolies, there are intellectual monopolies. But this intellectual monopoly is not regulated. And it's not to its benefit. It does so many good things, but because there's no critical overview, sometimes the train skips the tracks, which is what happened in this case. This problem is compounded by the fact that the perspectives of major Holocaust centers around the world, such as the Washington Museum, are also, they're over-synchronized, they think similarly, even though one would think they would be competing for prestige and for truth. This de facto yields what we would call, I guess in economics, a de facto cartel. And cartels are not illegal in America, at least, and they're not healthy, not in the intellectual and not in the commercial realms. These two must change. Professor Aaron Dershowitz, the noted lawyer, wrote us the following: "Your work sounds interesting. The best way to break a monopoly is to compete with it in the marketplace of ideas. There is no monopoly on truth or on history. Victor Hugo said that one can put up an army against another army and they will win. There's no army that can be put up against a powerful idea. And the story of this rescue is a powerful idea that is unstoppable. It's just a question of time until things will change. We need a diversity of competing perspectives on the complex and important matters related to obstruction, not one view. Nobody has the right view. In fact, the Talmud always has two views, Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. There isn't one view on complex matters. Today we have ostentatious houses of simplified answers from which visitors walk out as carriers of pre-cooked, pre-chewed, ideologically motivated and tainted simplified answers. What we need is more modest but authentic houses of questions from which visitors walk out as lifelong questioners, truth seekers and critically thinking individuals. We need a grown-up's version of history. The modality of thought and dialogue where reality is not black and white, where the good is sometimes blemished, and the blemished often includes much that is good, just like we heard from Dr. Appelfeld. Sometimes the blemished is what was saved, not the good, not the normal citizen. We must live as a mature people in a mature country already, after 60 some odd years, to deal with Metziut Murkevet, with complex reality, not children's reality. We propose that the story of rescue by Jews and non-Jews be taught in the school system, but outside the Holocaust curriculum, possibly. Because too stylized, too political maybe. It should be made part of courses on character development. And the rescuers need to be presented as authentic role models, not as saints, not necessarily as heroes, as role models, who probably had some flaws also. They're human beings after all, but they also did great things. And also as moral compasses, because you have to know which way is the moral north. Apparently in our country we no longer know that well. Most of our politicians are on policy investigation. So who are our moral compasses? You have to develop them. If you are interested in this topic, I encourage you to read our white paper, which is about a 20-page document that you can download from our website that goes into these issues at deeper level. Finally, I'd like to talk about one more thing, and I hope I'm not taking too long. Yad Vashem's very wise statement, which we firmly believe in, remembering the past, shaping the future. Yad Vashem, okay. Indeed, in formal and informal education, we need an authentic and fully truthful history of the past. We've all studied history in our schools. It's noted that the Hebrew word for truth, emes, or emet, starts with the letter aleph and ends with the letter tav, which means that truth is from aleph at tav. Like we say in English, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It's not selective truth. Selective truth, or truth that appears with makeup and cosmetic surgery, is no longer truth, it's something else. We also need to focus on the history of the future. I'll talk about it in a second. As we reflect on not just the history of the past, as we reflect on our own education and our children's studies, it is puzzling that all our learning relates to the past, and our educational experience doesn't prepare us for something even more important, the future, and of course the present. This is especially true in our time, which is driven by multiple interwoven streams of exponential growth. Things are changing extremely rapidly. We must immediately change the balance and devote much time also to teaching the history of the future to children, whatever that means. Well, that's another lecture what the history of the future could be like. Remembering the past and shaping the future can be yet another catchy slogan, or it can really be filled with deep and lasting meaning. We hope to participate in the development of this meaning together with others who are also dedicated to learn important lessons from our collective tragedy. In this task of searching for the truth, we must be solitary individuals in the community of questioners and the truth seekers. Although difficult, we must look at the past without our usual political and other affiliations and biases, which is very difficult to get rid of. Because many times history looks so different depending on what party we belong to, if you're religious or not religious, etc. But we cannot find the truth that way. We must be very careful not to isolate Holocaust history from reality and current concerns in our time. Surely we must not transform our tragedy into another golden calf, what we did in Sinai, and a passing fad. Of course we must remember and faithfully pass on our memories to our children and share this memory with other Jews. We surely must assure never again remains one of our slogans and our beliefs, because we never again want to be in the situation that our parents and grandparents were in. On the other hand, that's not enough. We must also learn important lessons from the rescuers and internalize their values and approaches to seemingly impossible problems which they solved, apparently. Sometimes as individuals, all alone. We must be sensitive to the major crises around us, certainly in Israel and and our region, but also globally. We cannot just look back at the past. We must look at the past, but not only at the past. We who always blame the world that it didn't care about our fate must be especially sensitive to crises, such as the rapid global warming and other ecological issues, which are likely to have disastrous consequences to all forms of life if not addressed. Maybe it's too late to address that. To problems of massive famine, to trafficking of women in Israel and internationally, to tragedies due to abandoned minefields and other major disasters around the world. We should remember that to a large extent the world, including many Jewish leaders and the Yishuv, were apathetic and abandoned us during the Holocaust. At the same time, we must also assure we don't abandon ourselves, the following generations and people around the world, in the context of today's and tomorrow's imminent major tragedies. Let's resolve to go beyond remembering and also act on the lessons learned. Let each of us ask in his own realm of concerns, what would the rescuers, Raoul Wallenberg, Rabbi Weissmandel and Gizi Fleischmann, Karl Lutz, Hillel Koch, Aristide Sousa Mendes, George Mantello, Giorgio Perlasca, Recho Steinbruch, Sempo Sugihara, Rabbi Solomon Schoenfeld and others like them do in my place, in my time? What do I have to do for today's burning problems? I urge you to reflect on what was and will be said tonight and ask how you can get involved and help. If you are committed to act, I encourage you to contact my colleagues and I, or Chaim Roth, who is going to be speaking after me, after the event. In conclusion, I'd like to say something brief. I'd like to say that I'm very touched that I'm here tonight with my dear and wonderful daughter Yael, who together with our other children and grandchildren would not be here if I was not rescued in Budapest in 1944-45. It is equally touching to be able to work together with special friends like Louise von Dardel, Raoul Wallenberg's niece, and Dr. Becky Cook, daughter of one of the major rescuers, Hillel Koch. It is a wonderful and a special experience to work with people one can fully trust and share values with. My dear parents in Nazi and fascist-infected Budapest in 1944-45 could not have imagined that their son will one day have the singular opportunity and privilege to participate in events such as this in our free Jewish country in Eretz Israel, or as they will call it, Eretz Israel, with close relatives of those who did so much to overcome darkness and did the best to excuse us.
The Auschwitz report, which should have electrified the world. It told them what was happening in Auschwitz, and of course that led to many other developments. The Peter Bergson mission in America, the Wallenberg mission, all of which in the end succeeded in saving the lives of anywhere from 100 to 200,000 Hungarian Jews. So stay with us, and we will now present in video Rabbi Michael Weissmandel.
Regression, before technically, sound as a Samuel. זה מכוון, אני מצטער, למה זה לא עובד אז? יש אודיו? תעשי את זה שנייה?
What I wanted to say, but somewhat. Yeah. But first, two remarks. One, Anne Frank was mentioned. I was born in Holland, and I will come back to it because my personal history has something to do with what we are talking tonight. Anne Frank, this is right, is considered as a case of rescue, but it is also a case of betrayal. Finally, she didn't make it because of betrayal. So on the one hand, we have the wonderful Dutch who rescued. On the other hand, we had the Dutch betrayed her. And for one reason, only the first stage of the rescuing is remembered and not the second stage of betrayal. And so that is because it was said about, and I will come later. I also want to say to Larry, Larry said there is no monopoly of ideas and activism. So that we have two groups working on the same, but still different directions, means that he is right. There is no monopoly. So, and we are coming together, and I'm speaking here. I tell the personal story, and then you will know the strange things that spelled also by Valdeel, that we don't recognize our own heroes. And I was rescued by different wonderful Christian families. I won't go into it. But if there wouldn't have been I was at that time 11 years, if there would have been in the meantime, in the middle, a Jewish boy, young fellow of 20 years, I wouldn't stand here. Now in Holland, in the same Holland that was talking about betrayal on the one hand and rescue on the other hand, there was a village like in Chambon. Chambon is very well known in France, but there was another village that is called New Land, and a village close to the German border in eastern Holland. And most of the small village rescued Jews. Now there is precious two of these villages, Chambon and New Land, are recognized as a village by Yad Vashem, and there is a square, two squares, one of Chambon and one of New Land. And in New Land there is a plaque of 200 families, 200 persons, some of them families, who rescued Jews. By the way, many of them children. And in big letters are two of the underground who arranged this. There is only one problem. There were three. Why is the third missing? What did he do? His fault that he was a Jew. So that is the basic not understanding, and that's for different reasons. Larry has his theory, Padilla has his theory, maybe I have also some theory, and it is very strange. And as Larry was saying, 2 days ago, we had a meeting, we commenced a meeting of the Educational Committee of the Knesset. For the first time in 60 years that we're dealing with this question, and they asked actually Yad Vashem and also the Ministry of Education to prepare within 2 months, and the head of the commission, Rav Melchior, said, I come back to you in 2 months to have a program how to tell it to our youngsters. And by the way, we are doing it to tell to the youngsters. The youngsters should know this. So that's enormous progress, but very interesting. Yesterday afternoon, I got a call from the radio. They wanted to interview me because they'd heard about what happened at the meeting of the committee at the Knesset. I had just on other subject I was dealing with a conference call in the United States, so I couldn't answer him, and he couldn't appear on the radio. But then afterwards I spoke with him, and actually I had to defend myself, and not really. Why did I only start 10 years ago? Why not 60 years ago? And it was very strange, and he is right. Why didn't it start 60 years ago? Why not immediately? So on the one hand, it was so strange. I started 10 or 12 years ago, and thought I'm doing something okay. On the other hand, he is right. Why I not maybe 60 but 50 years ago, when I was still young, I didn't start with it. So that is. We are making progress. As Larry, things are changing because of our work, or because of Larry's work, and our insistence. And again, we as our group, we don't want to give any personal accreditation. We want that the youngsters, especially the youngsters of today, know it. And what was not mentioned, each speaker had something, that most of the rescue work was done by youngsters from 17 to 24 years. If we speak about Hungary, and people don't understand this, how could Wallenberg have worked and succeeded on routes without the Jewish participation? How could he contact the Jews at all? They had no contact. In France, the Jewish organizations, special organizations were set up to rescue Jews. Again, the same reasons. Many came from other countries. Many didn't know French at all. Again, how could they come to the Christians and be rescued without the assistance of Jewish people? So we are, and I don't want to make it long, we already heard it today much, and I think we are making progress, and it should be told. By the way, we're speaking about Washington. Washington, the 22,000 the righteous names of righteous people on one wall. We are not trying to get them. Maybe it should be other wall also. It's maybe just only examples, because it is very difficult to know today who were really the rescuers. But at least also in Washington, they should know that there were Jewish rescuers, not only the righteous people. So I'm very thankful that I was invited here, and we are going forward, and we see now that we have success. I think one of the biggest successes we had, that was at the meeting, at the educational, the meeting of the Knesset, and that they said to the Yad Vashem and the Minister of Education, they should prepare now a program, and that it should be known, and then maybe we have much work to do, more work to do in overseas and not in Israel. Thank you very much. We're ready for the ladies?
No, let's do the ladies first.
Our premier folk singers, David Ben Ruben, and I want to call upon him now to present us with one of his own composed numbers. Thank you.
From the glass house, for cowards he was there. So let us praise this courageous man, this righteous Gentile from Switzerland, who rescued Jews from their sorry plight, and from that glass house with life and hope lit up their night. And one of the noble few, these noble few, the Jews and the non-Jews, the Jews and the Gentiles, was a man who represented El Salvador, a man named George Mantello. And this song is called The Noble Few. I sing about the noble few who fought to save their fellow Jews. When dark despair reigned everywhere, who stood firm and when all hope seemed gone, in the Holocaust night they brightly shone, and through their deeds their names live on. George Mantello in Switzerland, the Saviour's mantle wore. Countless Jewish lives he saved with the papers he gave representing El Salvador. The Auschwitz report he released to the press, and 100 headlines screamed their protest at the Nazi crimes against the Jews, and Hungary's Regent Horthy could not refuse and stop the transports of death to Auschwitz from Budapest. So it is a fact, the thousands their lives do owe to the man who did not hesitate to act. an Orthodox Jew named George Mantello. I sing about the noble few who fought to save their fellow Jews when dark despair reigned everywhere, who stood firm when all hope seemed gone. In the Holocaust night they brightly shone, and through their deeds their names live on.
And the first certificate we would like to give to Dr. Becky Cook, and this because of the work of her father and many people around him. Her father was Hillel Cook, who many of you might know as Peter Bergson. I like to read what's in the certificate of gratitude. This is a certificate of gratitude to the Emergency Committee to Save the Jewish People of Europe. That's what the committee was called in the United States. It was led by Hillel Cook, also known as Peter Bergson. During a period of apathy to the fate of Europe's abandoned Jews, the committee dedicated itself in the United States from 1942 to rescue at the strategic level. Although the committee faced considerable obstruction, especially from Jewish leaders, sufficient public and political support was obtained to break through apathy. After much unnecessary and tragic delay, this convinced President Roosevelt to establish the War Refugee Board in January 1944. The War Refugee Board helped save the lives of large numbers of Jews, in part through the Raoul Wallenberg mission to Budapest, which the WRB supported. Had there been no obstruction, and if the committee received support earlier, then large numbers of additional lives would have been saved. So I'd like to present this to you, Becky. Thank you for working with me. Putting up with all my telephone calls and emails. But that you deserve a certificate yourself. We'd also like to present, besides the Jewish, we have a number of other certificates we're going to present next year, but this is going to continue until the situation will change, and probably in many more places around the world. And like I said in my speech, we do believe in Yad Vashem's motto, remembering the past and shaping the future. So after a lot of deliberation to determine what we're doing is right or not right, we decided to go and give a document to people who are not affiliated with that Holocaust in 1939 to 45. But people are doing things today that are changing the world today. And we don't want to offend anybody's sensitivities. I myself was in the Holocaust and lost many of my relatives there, unfortunately. It's a miracle that I'm here. But I think we have an obligation also to get connected to today, the past and today. Now, I don't know if these are the right people to give it to, but this is what we decided before the event. One of them is a politician in the United States, who you must have heard a lot about recently, Al Gore. And I didn't vote Democrat recently, but I voted the opposite. Al Gore recently presented a video on an inconvenient truth, where he talks very clearly about the dangers to ourselves and our generation. When I see my daughter, who we just had to leave recently, I wonder what kind of a future will she have on this planet. It's so beautiful. So I'd like to read to you what this certificate says. And as opposed to the certificates that we gave to Becky, which is called the Certificate of Gratitude, this is we call in tribute to, and it's a different colored paper, so we distinguish between the past and the future and the present. This is in tribute to Al Gore for focusing his energies on raising awareness internationally about imminent danger to all living things on the planet due to rapid global warming. His efforts are dedicated to assure we rescue large numbers of human, animal and plant life which are in grave danger, to ensure there is no dramatic drop in quality of life, possibly already in a few decades, and to preserve diversity on our beautiful planet. It is hoped that his repeated wake-up calls are heeded in time, and that society's leadership's gross failure of imagination and apathy during the Holocaust is a warning sign and not part of an ongoing debilitating pattern in human psychology. Now, we're not sure that Al Gore is the man necessary to he certainly is not, to receive all the credit for speaking about this particular danger on the planet. Some of his video is also political. He attacks the other party. One could also ask, what did Mr. Gore, Vice President Gore, do when he was in power as a Vice President? But on the other hand, his message is very clear, and he spoke at about 1,000 locations, and not just in the United States. So it's basically symbolic, this certificate, that we should really start thinking, what did we really learn from the Holocaust? How do we prevent additional dangers to humanity? And I'm going to give this certificate and the next certificate to the representative of the United States Embassy, who is with us today. The second certificate, after some thought, and I'm sure we could have picked somebody else, these are all symptomatic, symbolic acts to remember the past and to shape the future. I'd like to give in tribute to Professor Nicolas Negroponte and his colleagues at the MIT Media Lab for decades-long history of innovation and important social applications of convergent digital media, and for many important projects bringing the benefits of modern digital technology to the disadvantaged. The recent One Laptop Per Child initiative will shortly provide millions, or maybe tens of millions, of low-cost computers to children in the third world. This is a bold and laudable vision with potential to empower large numbers of young people and rescue them from ignorance, poverty, hunger, and disease, and will inspire them to build a better world for themselves. So I'd like to present these two documents to you. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. I'll just be very brief. It's my very distinct honor to be here on behalf of my government and to accept these certificates for these individuals. I served in Berlin for 2 years, and I think that's, I also had a small child there. Until you have a child, I don't think you can fully appreciate the impact the Holocaust has had on people globally and the way we think about the world. So I just want to thank you very much for this Rescuers' Day celebration, commemoration.
Don't forget, I'd like to present you one more certificate. Sorry, it's a different color. I won't read it, but it's to Raoul Wallenberg. Why is it to Raoul Wallenberg? Because actually you don't represent Sweden, but in some sense, your country, my country, I'm also a US citizen, proudly so, besides being an Israeli citizen. It was your country who sponsored and helped Raoul Wallenberg through the War Refugee Board. Very late, and we could find tremendous flaws in Roosevelt that he didn't do something earlier for us, and we suffered a lot because of that. But still, we cannot disconnect the Wallenberg mission from the War Refugee Board in the United States, especially those people in the Congress and the Senate who helped Dr. Becky Cooks, Becky's father so much and his group. And mostly, I must say with a lot of embarrassment, was the non-Jews who helped him. And without that help in Congress and Senate, the War Refugee Board wouldn't have happened. And about the 200,000 people who the War Refugee, the emergency committee saved, would not have been saved. By the way, there's another representative of a family here, Malka Robbins, whose husband, and Danny Robbins, whose Malka's husband was the chief lobbyist, as far as I understand, in Washington. Right, Betty? Yes. So thank you very much. Thank you. Betty, would you like to read Louise's statement? Okay. It's not better to do this one. Yeah, say a word. I'd like to say just one word about this. Dr. Becky Cook, who is a friend of Louise von Dardel, is going to read a statement by her. Louise von Dardel is Raoul Wallenberg's niece living in Paris. She's a wonderful person. I think that her uncle will be very proud of her because in many ways she has a good heart and she's a bold thinker and her heart is in the right place. So Dr. Becky Cook agreed to read a statement by Raoul Wallenberg's niece. Oh, just a second. Yeah, that's right.
My uncle Raoul Wallenberg studied architecture in America. In 1944, he was a 32-year-old businessman and was part of high society in neutral and peaceful Sweden. One day, he got the offer from the War Refugee Board to go on the mission to save Jews from the grasp of Eichmann in Budapest. It took only a few days for him to decide to accept this dangerous an enormously challenging mission, and to go. This would not have been possible if Wetzler and Verba, prisoners in Auschwitz, had not managed to escape in order to report details of the murdering machine. If courageous people in Bratislava, especially Rabbi Weissmandl, had not written a report giving out the facts to governments and institutions. If George Mantello in Geneva had not immediately assured publishing details in the international press about the death camps. If, in spite of intense opposition, Hillel Koch in America did not lobby for political will to help save the Jews, and if the War Refugee Board would not have been set up. Furthermore, the Wallenberg mission could not have succeeded if the American Jewish community had not gathered the necessary resources, if the Swedish king had not agreed to give Raoul a diplomatic passport, and if the Swedish government did not agree to give my uncle a free hand and a base of operation at the Budapest Swedish embassy. If even one of the above didn't happen, then many lives could not have been saved. My uncle could not have achieved the impossible if he was not deeply touched by the great tragedy, if he didn't in his heart know what was the right thing to do, and if he didn't accept the risk of that mission. He succeeded because of his imagination, his courage, his sense of harmony and compassion, his sense of humor, his organizational and negotiating skills, his self-empowerment and almost limitless energy. Thus enabled him to save tens of thousands of people from the Nazis and Hungarian fascists. Besides the above motivations and qualities, he had no experience whatsoever for such a special and exceptional mission. In Budapest, he set up a large organization and employed about 400 Jews who participated in rescue of other Jews. Various skills were needed, and each person took on different functions according to what they thought they could do. My uncle joined his efforts with that of like-minded diplomats from other countries in order to increase the efficiency of their common mission, to save lives, to make life bearable, and to take action so the future of the Jewish community would be ensured. At the end of the war, when Budapest was liberated, Raoul was abducted by the Russians on January 17, 1945, never to be seen again. After having saved so many lives, what did the world do to rescue him? There is a lot to learn from beacons in the dark like my uncle, who saved many people and ensured the possibility of life for future generations. The rescuers were role models for each other, inspiring one another and putting rescue in the air. By their example, they showed the power of collaborating individuals working towards a common goal. They are authentic role models for us today as well as for future generations. The question today is, how do we recognize them, support them, learn from them, and when necessary, act like them? Since the Second World War, there were many tragedies, genocides, and so much suffering. Where were the rescuers then? If there were any, then why don't we know anything about them? As in my uncle's time, rescue of today's and future generations is necessary. What is required is individuals with bold imagination, daring, commitment, pure and caring hearts, as well as the willingness to act together to assure a better tomorrow.
For the video now, okay? Just a short of Weissmandl now, okay?
I'll keep this.
Yeah, sure, that's right, sure. Louise is about to have it.
We solved our technical difficulties, and now we're going to do the video on Rabbi Weissmandl.
Weissmandl called the Jewish leadership of the time blind fools. The last thing that we're going to do is show Hillel Koch speaking for a few minutes, about 7 minutes. It's from an interview that was taken by
I read one horrible, probably the most horrible moment of my life in Washington in November of 1942, and buried in the 8th or 10th page of the Washington Post. I remember it was on the left side of the page, on the little story maybe. The headline was about 3-4 inches. White saying, Rabbi White says 2 million Jews slain, something to that effect. And this newspaper story changed my life because I instinctively reacted. I said, this is the overwhelming thing happening in the world today that's dominating my life. In fact, I couldn't go on what I was doing. I was the director of the Committee for the Jewish Army, which was, after all, very close to these issues. And I couldn't go on and keep an appointment that day with the congressman to talk about Committee for the Jewish Army because it seemed futile. Therefore, without justifying and condoning Roosevelt, I must start by saying that in all decency, human decency, one has to ask, what did the Jewish leaders do to shake Roosevelt, produce 2 concurrent resolutions in the House and in the Senate, which called on the President to establish a special commission to save the remnants of the Jewish people. And on this, the Jewish leadership, and especially the Zionist leadership, put monkey wrenches because they said that you shouldn't say save the Jewish people, you should say save the Jewish people by opening the gates of Palestine. And we said that you are dooming them because you shouldn't say save people conditionally to what? And Wise testified. He got Congressman Bloom to have open hearings to stymie this resolution. And he came there and he testified. Naturally, he didn't say that it's better to have such an agency. He said it's not enough. If you say it's not enough, it isn't good. Why should American congressmen do it if Rabbi Weiss didn't? By the way, he didn't convince them. He managed to convince Bloom to pigeonhole it. He never came out for a vote in the House. But it passed unanimously in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. You know, even though once the House started hearings, the Senate was supposed to wait for it, except that, and we couldn't get the chairman, Tom Connolly, to take it up. And then one day we waited until one day he was sick. He was an old man. And the acting chairman was Senator Thomas Afuto, who was an intellectual Mormon religious man. And as a religious man, he planned it all. He's the man who told me, wait until one day I'll resign, I will pass unanimously, and he did. He said there's no position in this resolution, to the contrary, we all feel it should be done. And it passed.
And this led to the war refugee war?
This led to the creation of the war refugee war, which was a victory and defeat. It was a victory because the president has heeded the pressure from Congress and from public opinion, because we raised a lot of feathers, you know, and we did whatever humanly possible.
So, could the Jews have been saved?
Well, I mean, did Jews? Obviously not, because by the time we found out, there were already probably more than a million, maybe as many as 2 million or more Jews killed. So the Jews couldn't have been saved. But certainly not from the time that I learned about it, which is November 42. But could many, maybe even most of the surviving Jews of Europe, the Jews who were alive in Europe in November 42, been saved, in my opinion, definitely yes. It's a heartbreaking statement to make, and it haunts me, but this is my conviction. I wish I didn't have it, but I re-examined it, and unfortunately it holds. However, very simply, you see, let's take fantasy and let's take reality. Fantasy is the same kind of reaction that my colleagues from Palestine and the American friends who worked with us in the Committee for the Jewish Army, they had the same reaction that we had. If Rabbi Weiss, when he had that press conference the day before, about which I read in the paper, would have fainted right there, or would have torn his clothes, and would have called a meeting the next day of all the leadership of the Jews, you know, and said, what are we going to do, and declare the real emergency. You know, I have no doubt that they would have convinced the American government that it has to be become a task of America's war aim. One of America's war aims would be to counter this German war aim of killing the Jews and becomes Americans' purpose to save the Jews. I don't think this was a difficult notion to pull across. And but he didn't do that. He just said some very innocuous word, reacted normally, and then everybody went on to business as usual. And when I left Washington that same day, the first thing I did is run to see Assistant Secretary of State Adolph Berg. It was more conference with him that Rice came out when he announced the massacre, which I saw in the paper. And I just ran there, I called up and I said I must see to the secretary. I met with him before as part of groups of the Committee for Jewish Army, the leadership of the Committee for Jewish Army. So I knew him, not well, but he would know my name. I've seen him a couple of times before. And I called the secretary and I said, did you see this thing in the paper? She says, yes. I said, is it true? And she says, unfortunately, she said, and I said, I must see him about this. And I just told her I'm coming and I'll wait until he's free, because he wasn't in the office, he was in the White House. And then he saw me. And he confirmed this to me. As a matter of fact, he even said that they've been urging Rice to announce it a few weeks earlier. And I said, what are you going to do about it? Which I think, Larry, is a normal human reaction. I mean, when you hear of a thing like that, what are you going to do? And he says, what can you do? I say, surely there's something you can do. I said, I don't know what I can do. I'm telling you, Mr. Secretary, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do everything I can. I mean, from now on, it's all I'm going to do. Is try and save the Jews. And then, this and that, and I felt, I mean, if I want to do something to save the Jews, I should make an enemy of an Assistant Secretary of State. So I apologized, and I thanked him for his kindness and so forth, and I left. And I went straight to the first phone I could reach and called Marilyn, New York, who was my right-hand man in those days, and called a meeting that night of all the active people in the Committee for Jewish Army, and I made a speech that was published someplace in the Answer magazine, in which I said that from now on we get up in the morning, we work all day and go to bed at night, only with one subject, and this is how to save the Jews. Now if this would have been the attitude by 10% of the Jewish leadership in this country, many more, for every percent of Jewish leaders who would have thought so X percent of Jews would have been saved. But there weren't any. Harold Ickes, the Secretary of Interior of the United States, was honorary chairman of the Emergency Committee to Save the Jewish People of Europe, which we eventually established in Washington. But he wouldn't give us one important Jew who joined our committee. One didn't rebel against the establishment and said, these people have an emergency committee to save the Jewish people of Europe. We joined. Max Lerner, the so-called liberal intellectual, who was co-chairman of the emergency conference to save the Jewish people of Europe, and did an excellent job because he's a very intelligent, bright man, and he was at the prime of his life then, as an academic person, and he steered this conference very well together with the other chairman. 3 weeks later, under pressure of the Jews, he calls me up, and he did an article while the conference was going on. He was writing for PM. He did an article called "How's About the Jews FDR?" The PM was a pro-FDR paper, so was he. And urging Roosevelt to do something. And 3 weeks later, he calls me up, and he became co-chairman of the emergency committee, together with other prominent people. And he calls me up and says he's going to resign. And I said, why? And he says, I don't want to be involved in internal Jewish squabbles. I said, Max, you were with us. I mean, you were on the foundation of this thing. What squabbles? Are we talking about Jewish squabbles? We're talking about saving the Jews of Europe. And he says, well, I've been pressured and this and that, and I'm resigning. And then I said to him, how's about the Jews, Max Lerner? And he started scheming at me, saying, I won't permit anybody, not even you, as much as I admire you, he says, to lecture to me. I said, I still ask you, how's about the Jews, Max Lerner? And that was in July. Now, the Jews could have been saved because it was possible to convince the Allies, especially the American government, that they should accept it as a principle. They should establish a special commission to save the Jews, not the war refugee board, because Hitler was massacring refugees and massacring Jews. And we should have done it a year earlier. The war refugee board was established late December 43, it was in 44 actually. All organized a demonstration of 500 rabbis. We finally managed to get one courageous Orthodox Jewish rabbi, the head of Agudas Israel, the non-Zionist outfit. Because all the rabbis boycotted us when we tried to organize it. And we had a tremendously impressive march to Washington. And we got Vice President Wallace to interrupt the session of the Senate, which he presided on deliberately that day, and asked all the senators to come to the steps of Capitol Hill to receive these rabbis who arrived by special train or marched on the Capitol. And we then marched from, after Wallace made a speech and the rabbis gave him a petition, there were tremendous papers in all the press and everywhere, all these rabbis crying. And we marched on the White House, and we tried for weeks before this demonstration to have Roosevelt receive the delegation just like Wallace received it. And it was the Jewish advisors established in a memoir of Roosevelt's Secretary McIntyre, who was actually the man who received us, who said that one of the Jewish advisors said, President Jewish friend said, these are not the kind of Jews you should associate with. And they spurred him out of the White House. Officially they told us he's out of town. What they did is that a couple of hours earlier they took him to a base to dedicate a bomber that was flying to Tito. This is what petrified, frightened Jews can do to themselves and to the brothers.
Because one of the things that kept them from calling it a Jewish rescue war, that kept the rescue of the Jews from being a war, was the fear of the Jewish war, the Lebanese propaganda.
What do you mean they will say it's a Jewish war? Who will say it's a Jewish war? Hitler. Hitler was screaming his propaganda it's a Jewish war, so what? The Allies didn't go to war for it. He was screaming it's a Jewish war because they went to war. The people who were afraid of the Jewish war were the Jews. Then and today, because they still accept it as an excuse.
What about the feeling that you couldn't ask an American boy from the Midwest to fight to save the Jews of Europe?
Well, what was he fighting for? What was he fighting for, the American boy from the Midwest? I mean, who said he should fight to save the Jews of Europe? Did he fight to save the Scotch farmers in Scotland is better? Why is a Jew less a human being than a Scotch farmer? Didn't he go over? Was America threatened directly? And if America was threatened, wasn't saving the Jews part of saving America? I mean, wasn't he in the war? Wasn't it one war? Or was Hitler's war against the Jews something outside, where the Jews are outside of the pale of humanity? And this is precisely the core of the issue. But if you want to know what was the difference, is that we reacted on an assumption that the Jews are equal human beings. And I'm asking you again the question, why did the Allies threaten the Germans to use poison gas against them if they use it against Greek farmers, or Polish officers, or Norwegian seamen, and not against Jews? Why was it so outrageous to say that you should use poison gas to kill Jews? I said it was a crime that they didn't do it. Because this was encouragement. And we said so. We had a phrase, we said, to the criminal Nazi mind, this is encouragement. And this was encouragement. To summarize, your question was, did Jews could have been saved? Obviously not. Jews could have been saved. The proof is very simple. As the whole horror was over, hundreds of thousands of Jews survived. If we, the Jews, would have done our job better, if even we on the committee did our job better, I mean, we tried our utmost, but obviously we could have done more. If the Jewish leadership would have acted, if the Jews would have acted, the number of the survivors would have been doubled, tripled, fourfold. I don't want to make a gesture, but I think it's important to know that the number of people who survived was up to us, and it was so small, it was the inadequacy of our activities. And if I were a Jewish leader, dead, I'd probably turn in the grave, and if I was alive, I would have a very guilty conscience.
We're at the end of our evening, and I'd just like to say a few concluding words. First about Hillel Cook. I think he's so in technology, which is what I understand. We have something called a demo for a new concept. I think we saw a demo of what the rescuer inner dynamics was, what kind of people these were. Lothar von Weissmuller would practice hard out. I heard he was crying every single night after the Holocaust. And Hillel Cook, just a few words about him. As an octopus of a prototype of the kind of rescuer that did something for us. He was sent to America as a very young man. Like he said, these are all very young people. He was, I think, in his 20s when he was sent to America. Wallenberg was in his late 20s also. He was sent to America with Jabotinsky, I think, to raise money for the Jewish army. They trusted a young man like him. He decided to abandon his mission, and he gave himself a new assignment as a commander of a military group, a Wetzell, in the United States, to save the Jews of Europe. He put Zionism aside. He said it's okay to park something for a while. He decided to park it. He did. You saw what he has done for us. After the war, he raised the money again for arms. He raised the money for the Altalena. I heard in New York that actually the Altalena was supposed to go to Haganah, not to Wetzell. I'm sorry? To Sahel. I heard in New York from somebody who was close to him that he's the one, because he was the leading commander in that cell, was not in jail and not killed. He's the one who appointed Begin to be the leader of the party. So it was otherwise, could be that would have been Ben Gurion and Hillel Kook, could well be, very intelligent guy. He was in the First Knesset. He, in the First Knesset, fought incessantly with Ben Gurion on an intellectual issue. Let's create an orderly state, which is based on the Constitution. And I think he called 1948, 1776. He was so much influenced by the political thought in the United States, in the Federalist Papers and the formation of a modern state in those days. In the architecture of a state, instead of Balagan, at least they thought about how to set up a state. So this phenomenal character, and many of the others are. And often I think about what would Wallenberg have done if he did survive. Many of these